doctor.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dovec, and she's a dietitian.
Hey, I'm Hannah Schuyler, and together we are the DoctorXDietitian Collab.
And today we are bringing, honestly, one of my favorite patients of all time. His stories is one of the most remarkable stories ever. I operated on him in Maryland. Welcome everyone to Jason Anderson to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have a lot to really unpack here. You have quite the story, and we were chatting beforehand to all of our listeners about, how personal do you want to get? Like, this can be, you want to get vulnerable, raw, emotional, and he said he's going to tell all, and he has quite the story. So really just giddy up here. And we also really wanted to do this today because there are only, did you know, Jason, only 10 to 15% of all of those who undergo bariatric surgery are men. And we would love your perspective on why is that?
It's interesting. I was obese for most of my life and graduated high school 400 pounds. And the first time I lost significant amounts of weight was in a 12-step recovery program, and it was the same statistics.
Wow.
So it was a food addiction specific recovery program, and maybe 5% men in the whole program. And I used to think, like, it's not for any shortage of candidates. It's just that I guess men, this is just my opinion. I think that most of the men that I know are less inclined to be vulnerable or to be able to say, hey, I don't know what's best, and I need somebody else to tell me what's best. And I think a lot of men struggle with that. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that it's like that vulnerability of needing, saying, what do I need? But like getting care for themselves. You hear about men that just don't go to the doctor and they find out really late that they have like late stage cancers and things like that. And it's just, there's just, I think, a wall that's built, and it's a societal thing. I mean, it's just kind of how things are done. And so, yeah, it's important to start to break through those societal pressures and barriers because
Definitely.
there's no reason to.
Yeah, we want to break down some stereotypes. I'm sure that this podcast, I undoubtedly will save a life, whether that be man or woman. I think your story is that powerful. So I want to start in the beginning. You just said that you graduated high school at 400 pounds.
Yeah.
And just, how was that growing up? Were you in Maryland? Like, tell me a little bit, just like, what's your background? What's your story on how you kind of started there?
Yeah. So I had a military family. So I grew up in Spain, and my father moved back when I was in elementary school to Maryland. So and he remarried. I think for me, food became like a coping mechanism, as a child, and so a lot of the, my home life was kind of unpredictable, and I used food as a coping mechanism, because there was alcoholism in the family. There was a lot of, the addiction, and food just became like this readily available source of unlimited anxiety reducing medication, and I just got in that habit of self-medicating probably in 7th grade when my dad divorced, they divorced. So I just remember getting into this habit of eating at night, and not being restricted, not really having the guidance from my parents of saying, hey, here's how you eat in a healthy way. And what happened is it was this cycle of shame in the morning when your parents find out, like, oh, who ate all this stuff, and then they would, kind of bring that news to you in a shameful way instead of talking you through it. So it was always this, like, I need to do this in secret. I can't let them find out. I have to hide it when possible. And those things really developed, I think, in middle school, high school, to the point where it just got normalized for me. Genetically, I just have it bad on both sides of the family. There are really obese people on my father's side. He had a huge family, and I want to say at least 3 or 4 of my aunts and uncles were well over 400 pounds, and lived past the age of 50 or 60, but still very heavy. And my mother too struggled and has been obese most of her life. So I think, it was tough. I was very introverted, as a high school kid, the one thing that really kept me going was music, because that was a way for me to, like, I wasn't an active person. I tried to play 1 year of sports, and it was so, grueling for me that I just, like I said, I can't do that anymore. And, you know, so music is kind of where I excelled. And that was one way that people could see, I was a quiet kid. But food was really just my number one coping mechanism. And by the end of high school, it had become like, I couldn't stop. And I was in that cycle of, sneaking food and all these things that I would later find out that's what food addicts do. That's,
Yeah.
I'm not alone.
Oh, yeah, and that's hard to say. That's what food addicts do, to come to that terms
Yeah.
that like I have an addiction to this and this is a problem, and that's hard to say and I think to come to terms with. So after you finish high school, now you're I know that your family is going through these personal issues, the divorce, and how
Yep.
that breaking this family up and how tough that is. And then ultimately you get out of the house, and then where do you go, and how does your health take a turn at that point?
So interestingly enough, that I graduated high school in 1995, and that was right when Fen-Phen was a thing, right? So my father at the time, he said, there's this doctor down at Mercy in Baltimore, and he's got this medication that patients are seeing, good results from. And I said, are you kidding? A medication that'll help you lose weight? Like, this is perfect, So I went and tried, and I will never forget, like, they didn't have a scale that could weigh me. So I had to go to the laundry room of Mercy Hospital, to step on the laundry scale.
Oh my God.
So that was like, that I can remember, like, the embarrassment there and having to, like, have the staff help and everything. But I started taking the combo, phentermine and fenfluramine, and I lost weight. I lost over 100 pounds, and I really felt like for the first time I was active. I went off to college. I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I had friends up there that, we played racquetball. I ran, I was very active. And I think the medication really helped, as long as I had made sure that I wasn't just trying to eat whatever, and also monitoring that and staying hydrated and all the other important stuff, I want to say it was like my second year there or late into the first year that I went to refill my script up there. And I was totally unplugged from the outside world, that no cell phones then, the internet wasn't as ubiquitous, so I was pretty much just studying and practicing all the time, trying to keep up with, the crazy competition there. And I went to refill my script, and they looked at me funny, and they said, "Oh, I can't refill this." And it was when they had taken it off the market, and they had the whole, the lawsuit. I think phentermine is still out there, if I'm understanding. It's fenfluramine was the other one.
That's the bad fen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So luckily enough, I never saw any, adverse effects from either of the two. I lost the weight, but as soon as I went off of that, I just felt like lost. Like I didn't have any medical guidance. I didn't really have the guidance of a dietitian saying, I was poor, which also, doesn't help, so I was like dirt poor. So that's kind of what brought me into my 20s,
Whew. So that, the rug just gets pulled out from under you. You have this treatment, it's finally working.
Yeah.
Like you said, like it's a magic pill for you. And oh goodness. And so when that happens, was it a fast regain of your weight? Was there like a spiral from you emotionally, or was it just something you accepted and you kind of kept it off?
So me personally, I had a very emotional and psychological reaction to just cold turkey, like coming off of it and not knowing that it was happening. And then I was scared that I wouldn't be able to regulate, and having access to the cafeteria the whole time, when you're a college student, it's like the food's just there and you have to self-regulate, it's the portion is as much as you want to eat, So that's historically where I've done the worst, is I just portion control. I felt like I had no off button. It wasn't a quick regain. And I remember I lived in Boston for about 2 years after school, and then I moved to Georgia. And that's when I started to really notice that I was gaining again. I wasn't riding my bike around the city. I wasn't as active. And of course, Southern cooking. I mean,
Yeah, that's where my mind went immediately. I was like, gosh, Georgia, not the best place to move to
gosh.
not regain weight.
So now you're in Georgia, and so what are you doing for your career? What's going on with you personally? Where are you at with this?
so it's interesting. Like, and I know we said we were going to do deep dive here, but so I moved to Georgia because I had never met my biological mother. She left when I was very young, totally different circumstances. So I met her when I was 21, and I felt like I needed to take some time in my life. I had an uncle who lived in a very, small town in Georgia. He knew I was struggling. He said, "Hey, come live with me, get on your feet. You can get reacquainted with that side of the family," because I had her side of the family, like my grandmother at the time was living in South Georgia. So I said, that sounds great. I really felt like at the time, my early 20s, like I really was ready to meet my mother and to kind of understand that half of me. And that's what I did. As far as my career went, I was just working, whatever job could give me health insurance and pay me the most per hour at that time in my life.
Yeah, just surviving
Surviving.
and going through this new, gosh, the twists and turns of these major life events and moving and all. Oh. So, okay. So then how do you end up going from Georgia and then how do you meet your wife and how does that all happen?
It's great. Great story. So from Georgia, I gained weight. I moved back up to Maryland and just had to get back on my feet. I had a car accident. I wasn't back up to 400 pounds, but I totaled my car down there and just had no means to just get a new car or anything. And it was time to come back home and just relax, right? So I got into my current career when I came back up, in healthcare, finance, and medical billing and all. I really started to gain weight when I had that 9 to 5 sitting in front of a computer all day, and I still played music, and I got very active playing with bands in the Virginia, Delaware, Maryland area. So that was my release, but at the same time, that also kind of exposed me to alcohol, which I never really identified with. I never really called myself an alcoholic because food was my number one drug, and alcohol for me, I drank enough to where those superficial boundaries or the inhibitions would be lowered, and then I would eat. So it was like the gateway to eating for me,
Yeah.
So I gained probably the most I had up until 2005, and in 2005 I became aware of Overeaters Anonymous and Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous, a couple of different programs out there, and it was the first time that I started thinking of my eating as like disordered in some way. Like I couldn't stop, and something about that word resonated with me. And I know that's not universal for everybody who's, obese per se. But for me, it definitely resonated, the word addict. And I went to my first meeting and I knew that I related to everybody, there. And what they were saying was my story, and they were talking about, throwing food away, but wrapping it up in such a way that you can come back and grab it out of the trash when everybody's gone, and sneaking food in the office and sneaking food at parties and obsessing about food. And I was just like, this is my whole life. This is what I've been doing my entire life. So I got in, and their whole premise was very similar to like what we do. I mean, no flour, no sugar, and weighed and measured meals. So like the portions were controlled. And I started eating, healthier than I had ever eaten in my life. And I lost 200 pounds at that point. I went from 400 to 200 and was, healthier than I'd ever been, was going to the gym 5 times a week. And it was during that time I said, I didn't feel like I've ever been spontaneous, and I've never had that experience of like just being out there and having fun. And I said, I'm going to leave this program now. And that's when I met my wife. She had just come out of law school, and she was bartending, and I used to play music in a lot of the bars in Ellicott City, and that's where we met. So.
Oh, I did not know that. That is sweet. Okay, so you guys meet, and obviously we know she's now your wife, but how was that relationship? Because now you're kind of at the peak of your health and your physical shape and
Yep.
love and life, and sounds like things are going great. And does it stay that way?
So I think I'm not alone in, sometimes people getting comfortable with relationships I've learned, and just like getting into a place where like, this person accepts me, and I don't need to keep this crazy schedule, or keep weighing my meals. And I felt the pull to be more spontaneous, even though I was very open with her from the start that I identify as a food addict. And I told her about the meetings, and I told her about how important the program had been. She was completely supportive no matter what I wanted to do. But I think for me, I convinced myself that I couldn't live with that much rigidity. Like it was tough. Like I did it for a very long time, but just like measuring every single meal got to a point where at that time in my life, it just seemed like too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is. And that's the thing. I think a lot of these rules, like at some point, like we're not meant to be caged, and you
Right.
just feel like I got to break out of this and I got to
Yeah.
fix this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, we talk about like goal weights and their weight, things like that. And I'm like, if it's too much work to stay at that particular weight, it's not really a realistic one. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to maintain it. And if it is, and you mentioned kind of feeling like, yes, I had like disordered eating. And when you have that history of disordered eating, and then you move into this new other kind of disordered eating pattern of being so restrictive, you kind of go one extreme to the other. And
Right.
it's finding more of, I think, but balance for somebody who has an addiction is not always, not always possible. So it's
Right.
really finding that right formula for you, which obviously we'll get there eventually. Spoiler, it's bariatric surgery, but
I gained.
So you gained.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what. And I started gaining slowly. I maintained for about a year, and then I'll never forget like that first day that I went to put the jeans on, and I was like, these don't fit anymore, and I just, everybody at work and everybody in your life, like they see this tremendous weight loss, and it was like devastating to everybody's complimenting you on the way down, but nobody says anything on the way back up, and that's the one thing I noticed. And I gained all the weight back plus like another 100 pounds on top, a lot of depression, a lot of personal struggles throughout, the first 10 years of our marriage, not really marriage related, just personal. And just, I think a lot of that was around the weight gain and the health issues that I started to have because I got over 500 pounds. It just became a struggle to live.
Yeah, I remember meeting you, and you decided, I mean, I really want to hear more about you coming in and knowing your wife actually separately from you, because our little girls, at the time, my oldest Adrian and I think one or both of your two girls were in dancing, and I saw that they're still there, but that's a story we're going to get to. And they were dancing, and well, let's back up. Tell the story first about like, what was it that decided like, all right, now I'm hitting at 500 pounds. I know that, like you said, personally, my marriage, my professional life, I can barely move. I'm just trying to survive at this point. I have these kids. Like, what was the turning point for you to say like, all right, I'm going to look into bariatric surgery? Like, let's talk about that first, and then I'll tell you my impression of you and your family.
Yeah. So my brother is a physician assistant, and he always pushed for it. The one thing, there's two factors that I think kept me from considering bariatric surgery for a long time. One was this notion that like I did it in this program, and that idea had infiltrated my brain that like, oh, if you can't do surgery, you've got to change the way, you're thinking. And I wasn't thinking about it the right way. There were a lot of opinions that people had in the recovery program that almost like discounted people that had surgery or something. And I had a lot of that toxic thinking still in there. But the main thing that did it for me is my mother, she worked overseas for many years. And so she decided to have it years ago, flew to London and to one of like the premier bariatric surgeons at the time. And she does healthcare quality. So she like studied the cases and like looked up this person, paid out of pocket, had it done. saw tremendous success, and it just seemed like within a year and a half, she started gaining it all back and gained it all back and got, and I just like, I thought that's going to be me, right? Those are my genes. That's going to be me. That's my story. That's what's going to happen because that's what's happened every single time I've tried to do something like this. And I'm not going to take the risk of surgery only to arrive back at that, and that's what was in my brain at the time, It wasn't until I really started having significant health issues and I started really just getting so depressed because I could not participate in my daughter's lives. Like I couldn't go anywhere that required any walking. I couldn't walk. Walking became, almost impossible. I was hospitalized a couple times because I had recurring cellulitis on my legs. So that was scary. A couple of high fever incidents where like those could have turned into sepsis or something. But also I had one of the worst cases of sleep apnea that GBMC, the hospital up there in Baltimore, had seen at the time. So I just felt like my time was coming, and I'm not even 45 years old, and ultimately I just felt like it was my brother and my wife and my mother-in-law kind of had all given me information, and that's what led me to my first consultation at your office up there in Baltimore.
So what did you think? So you walk into this office and it was in person at that time. We weren't virtual, it was before COVID. So you come in, you sit in there. How was that? Just the whole experience of like, oh, I'm actually here. I'm doing this. I don't want to do this. Like, what were you thinking mentally?
That's a great question. I remember it. I was apprehensive, but I felt like I was in the right direction, because I really didn't have any other, I had nothing else. So if somebody's up there talking and it makes sense to me and it sounds like a hopeful message or like there is hope, that really gave me a lift. Like, okay, let me research this instead of carrying all this baggage that I have about it from the past,
Yeah. Yeah, so you do the consult, I meet you, and the thing, I've seen a lot of patients, and the thing that's always striking is like sometimes your personality and your body language and the way you're talking now and how cool and cute you look in your black on black outfit, like it's just like almost impossible. You're so memorable just being there. It's almost like you wanted to like shrink within yourself. Like,
yeah.
It's like you wanted to be invisible, even though that you were taking up space. And I just remember you were so quiet, so reserved. And so then I was at dancing. It was on Friday afternoons. I would be sitting there waiting for Adrian to get done. And of course I knew your mother-in-law really well since she worked at GBMC hospital. Yeah. And then also your wife. And they said, oh, you're operating on my son-in-law soon. And I was like, oh, well, who's that? And then she said, you. And I was stunned. I was stunned by it. And I realized that like you never came and you weren't there. And I was just like, and you could just tell that their hearts were like breaking. And I could feel the emotion even from your mother-in-law and your wife. And it was just like, they never ever like really said anything, but you could just see it in their eyes that it was just like, this was a thing that they knew who you were and who you were on the inside. And like you said, like she was accepting of you, and your wife is just a wonderful person. Like from what I can tell, like she's just so chill and just amazing. And but I could see that like, I could see like our family and your family. And I knew that like the weight was really just so hard on all of you. And it was just really hard to watch,
Yeah.
And I knew that also that like you had spent a lot of time where you weren't, I think, do you have like a basement or something that you were like sleeping in and you couldn't even really like come up the stairs like some days, or there was something that you were like so like occluded from the rest of your family just because you couldn't even physically like get going to come out to see these, this beautiful family, and just how crushing that was.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That was some of the hardest thing. That with the health concerns, I think, is what really drove me to bariatric surgery.
So I want to tell this story that I remember so much, and it makes me like a little bit emotional to remember this. So
Me too.
I told, I know it's like this is like very, very hard. This is one of, I think it might have been truly like the toughest conversation I've ever had. I I had this moment where first at the initial consult, I said, I don't like to put like you have to lose this amount of weight, and if you don't lose this arbitrary amount, then I'm not going to
Right.
operate on you. But I
Right.
always am basically like, listen, I'm gonna give you my all. Like it's gonna be like physically harder, but I'll meet you halfway. You show me that you're committed by losing some weight and just doing this. And you came in that day and you had gained something like 30 pounds or something. How much did you gain from your time I saw you in the office to that day on the operating
I,
area?
I don't think I had gained. I just didn't think I lost that much. I,
Okay.
I think it was like I knew I could have lost 50 pounds in that time because I had done it before and I knew exactly the roadmap to do it. And I only lost like 13, and from 520, that just, that was like the last week's worth of change for me, like water weight, and
Yeah.
my problem was I could not put down the alcohol. Like I felt like this timer was counting down to surgery. And even though I wasn't drinking every day on the weekends, I binged and I could not put that alcohol down for whatever reason. It just kept like, it was like the gateway that was taking me back into those bad food
Hmm.
practices.
Yeah, and I never really told you this, but I went to the pre-op area and I'm like, listen, like we definitely you were gonna do it and it didn't happen and you're at 520 and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do your surgery. Like
Yep.
I don't know if your liver is gonna be shrunk enough. Like I don't know if technically I can do it. And I might have to wake you up and say, like, I will do whatever it takes. But at the end of the day, like I'm not gonna put you at harm. I'm not gonna do something too risky. I'm gonna make you try to lose it. And I knew that if I didn't do the surgery, I just felt in my heart that there was no way that you were going to do the walk of shame, go to the recovery room. She couldn't do it. Pull the IV out, go home, and then come back. Like now I'm in fighting shape. Like I knew that, like, and your wife was sitting there, and you were there, obviously, and you're in this gown. I can remember what bay you were in. You were like, if you walk in the door, you were in the middle one, like right there on the left. Like I remember where you were sitting and where you were looking. And then I told you, like, I don't know if I can do this, and I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, if you've got to, like, you got to be all in, because if I do it, like, you got to do it. Like I gave you this, like, the toughest love. It was a place of love, but I was like so tough on you, and I'm like, I don't like. I felt like Dr. Nazardin from my 600-pound life. Like I felt like that, like forceful with you. And then like I walked away and I saw, I don't know why this visual like just really like gets me. Like you were sitting there, you're in this chair, and you had just were playing on your phone and she was playing on her phone, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, they're like just avoiding this whole thing. And you just, again, I just felt like you just wanted to disappear, and just I just felt like it was just so uncomfortable, such a tough moment. But I think it was a pivotal moment too
Very much
for
so.
who you are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget that. I've told that story many times. Like, and it's almost like, oh, all right, this is your last chance. That's what I felt right then. You just got the grace of a last chance. And maybe that was just like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something, and that wouldn't have been my last chance. I don't know, but it felt like my
I
last chance.
I know. I was like laying it out there like it probably was, because I just
Yeah.
couldn't see you returning for it. And
Yeah.
could you have done, you know, do it the normal way, the
Yeah.
diet and exercise way? Again, I don't know. Like how many times do you have that in you too? I mean,
I
that
tried.
that's
Yeah. I didn't mention
Yeah.
that. So I tried to go back to the program in 2016, when we bought our house that we're in now. And I just could not get that back. I could not go back to where I was in my 20s. Like I knew all the ways to cheat. I knew all the ways to, infiltrate
yeah.
and it was not working. I was working
Well,
with a sponsor in the program, and they were very understanding and lenient. And he actually was fully supportive of the surgery and said, whatever it takes to find your way, you know?
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you had a lot more probably layers in your life too at that point. In your
Yeah.
20s, you're kind of it's you on your own. You can do that. Now it's like you've got
Exactly.
the wife, you've got the kid, you've got
Kids,
the house, you've got the
career,
job, you've
right.
got, yeah, exactly. It's a much different situation to be in where it's not just about you anymore either. It's, you know, and
Yep.
probably looking at setting examples for your kids and what, you know, what am I teaching them in my life and all of that too.
Very much so.
Yeah. So let's go from the sad low
Yeah,
of
right.
this like dark moment. So let's go into the
Like
OR.
music.
I know. Let's do an upswing now, because now we're in the OR, and I mean, I will tell you, your surgery on the inside, you didn't have much like that visceral fat. You really didn't. And I was able to do it. I'm like, I can do this. Like, I looked at everything. I looked at the liver. I'm like, all right, let's go. Here we go. So we did the bypass, and you woke up, and like, I always say this, like, you pick out a good dream and you wake up on a mission, and you did. Man, like, you were just sort of this like, oh, I'm kind of like phoning it in, like you said, like I'm still like doing alcohol, I'm not really taking this seriously, or maybe just doing all that I could, to all of a sudden you go all in, I felt like, and it's evidence. But like, what was that? You wake up, you got the bypass, you have the knowledge, like, all right, what was it like then, like that early recovery to like keeping consistent and all that sort of thing?
Oh, at that point, I was getting a lot of support from, you know, from the Facebook groups that I had joined, like the bariatric groups. So it was nice having that resource. Also working with, you know, at the time, I think bariatric nutritionist, you know, that was critical. Just having the guidance of, you know, you remember, like, there was a binder, and that was like my Bible, that binder that told me, you know, here's what's safe for week 1. Here's what you do for week 2. Like, I have ADHD really bad, and, you know, I'm medicated now. I was diagnosed just a few years ago, but if you give me directions or organization, like, I'll thrive. You know?
Awesome.
You know, and that's what I did. And any questions, I really benefited from having the anytime link to ask questions on Facebook. Made a lot of connections that way, and then you start losing weight right away, and it's just like it was this snowball effect. Like, this might actually work, you know. And I kept track of I had downloaded an app, and for a while I just kept track of absolutely everything: hydration, food, and I took it really serious. And then I started to see, you know, the crazy results, and I started feeling better, and it just like compounded on itself, you know, the positive effects of, you know, feeling better and losing weight, and, you know, clothes are getting bigger, and you're able to share online now, which is a whole new dynamic. I mean, I'm
Sure.
I'm from the time when you know, that wasn't a possibility way back in the day. So that I thought that was wonderful, and met a lot of great people that way. So I think the combination of support and guidance from you and your office there, you know, is probably what really led to that success.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, that's awesome to hear. And, you know, just seeing, I mean, the snowball did happen very quickly, and it was like, whoa, gosh. I mean, man, that's another big perk, guys. Like, you do lose quickly. We talk about a lot about that. And you were just like, every picture was like, man, it was like doing it. And then I saw like, all right, you're coming out, like, what's going on out here? And you're coming back out into the world. And there's been a couple of posts that I feel like, sure, everybody sees them like, oh, how nice. You know, you might just keep scrolling, but I'm like zooming in. The one the other day at the dancing recital with the flowers, with you bending down, squatting down with your arm around your daughter. I mean, I was like tearing up, because I'm like, man,
I'm tearing up. I don't even have a connection to this dance studio.
I'm like, there's still the dance studio, and there he is. And I just know that you fought like hell to be at that dance studio in that picture, because you never were there. You couldn't be there. You physically couldn't do it. And I mean, how are all those, like the NSVs we talk about? I'm like, you were riding a ride on one of the things, and you're running, and you're at the dance studio, you're living life, and your girls just look so sweet and so happy, and you're there now. You're there. Like, how is that? I mean, just, can you even describe it? Like, how is that?
Oh, it's wonderful, you know, and it makes the difference of, like, you know, I can be present for my kids in a way that I couldn't before. You know, and I know that my kids love me and everything, but it's like, to be physical with them and to be able to walk with them and go to their, you know, all of their events and be able to participate more. as crazy as it sounds, so when I got up to my highest weight, I was scared to drive alone with the kids because I just really felt like I was on the verge of, I had these episodes where I couldn't catch my breath, and it scared me. And I had a legitimate fear of something happening and my kids being in the car. So like it put all that extra emphasis on my wife to be the one to like make sure that she's driving. And so that was just one other aspect. I mean, the non-scale victories are just, there's so many. I travel for work. I used to have to get 2 seats on the airplane, and thank God, like Southwest, you could buy 2 and then they would refund the extra after your flight, like a weird policy. So you could go onto the flight and nobody would question, like you could say, I purchased these 2, but then afterwards they understood, like you're just one person, and but being able to get around, I've noticed too, and I know this is more of like I want to say like weight makes a difference in the workplace or something, but I think it's not that. It's the confidence that I gained, and I'm the same person and I have the same ideas, but it's like people respond differently because I'm presenting things, confidently, instead of being that guy that you said is just, reserved and, very much like afraid to make waves and wants to disappear into the corner there. I'm just able to be present for my life in a way that I never thought, and that's the beauty of it. My kids.
Oh, it's such a beautiful story, and I mean, it's just stunning. And back to music. So you have these pictures of yourself still on stage performing. Those are some of the it seems like you don't have a ton of the befores, or at least at the highest weight in that
Right.
500 plus range, but you have that one picture of yourself playing guitar on stage. So are you still performing? Are you still
Yeah.
like doing all that stuff?
Yep.
That must be so much more fun too now. Just
It's so much more. I can stand, the whole time. It used to be after standing and playing for 3 hours or so, my feet were just totally shot. And none of that. I'm not exhausted when I'm leaving. I don't do the alcohol anymore. Just my personal preference. Because I know that it could lead me to a bad decision. So.
well, I think that's great to make that
Yeah.
conscious decision.
Yeah, when you know that it's again like one of your triggers and it's just it's not necessary.
Yeah, there's some
know?
things you can't do in moderation, and that's just how it is. So
Yeah.
how is it now that you've done so many programs? You've done medications with Fen-Phen, you've done
Yep.
the different support groups. Now we're more of a virtual convenient type of a thing. What was the date of your surgery?
January 2nd, 2020.
Wow. So right before COVID. Okay, I
Right
didn't
before
realize
COVID.
that too.
Right
So
before.
okay, so
Yeah.
wow, so January 2nd, 2020, and here we are 3 plus years later. How is it to maintain? Because you were at 520 plus and now you're at 220. You've lost over 300 pounds.
Yep.
How has it been to wake up and be in that conversion, I say cross the divide between the fun weight loss honeymoon and now going into the maintenance mode? How do you keep it off?
Sure. Great. Well, for me, I always stick to the fundamentals. And this is the first time that I feel like I'm not really putting a lot of emphasis or effort into maintaining my weight. As odd as that sounds, keeping track of the protein, I was regimented for about 1.5 years, and I used an app where I tracked everything. And then the app became smart and it remembers oh, you have this for lunch most of the time, and it would, so I was able to see for the first time when I did that, I was able to kind of see the relationship between how I felt and what I ate and drank, And then when I did away with the app, I just started going by feel. I know oh, it's 10 a.m. I should be at this much protein. I should have had this much water, however I get that, I don't really care. And I don't have to weigh and measure because I know what the serving sizes are now. But I'm just conscientious of protein. I make sure I'm meeting protein and hydration goals, and the rest just kind of takes care of itself. I hate to say that it's like a magic bullet or anything, but I just really feel like I had no off button prior to the surgery, and that the surgery was just like this gift of you do have an off button, and now I reached that point. I know my blood work is great. I know I'm getting what I need every day. And it's a whole new way of life for me. So
yeah, you finally have like satiation and
yeah,
satisfaction, I'm sure.
never experienced that.
Right.
Yeah, it almost brings you to like level playing out ground of people who don't have the genetics that you had or the metabolic and the hormonal. You're at a disadvantage. It's just not fair. Like, it's you're not eating all that much more, and just all those things together, it kind of makes it more, it levels the playing ground.
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody that was somebody like you years ago, struggling, a man, you know, obviously I mean, here's the thing. It seems almost like an impossibility, but like, what can you say about like, this can be you too? Like, can
Yeah.
you just say some words of encouragement to others, that something that you would have wanted to hear perhaps?
Yeah. Looking back, I think what I would have liked to hear is, yeah, you have nothing to lose by forgetting all of the things that people have told you, and, find your own way, make up your own mind, do your own research, for God's sake. Don't let internet research talk you out of stuff, or for God's sakes, don't let comment sections talk you out of stuff. Find your own truth, and look at these statistics. Because I'm a data person, that's what I do for a living. So when you gave me your outcomes and the data of, of the Roux-en-Y versus the other for people that were my weight, I just said, well, this is a no-brainer. Like statistically, I know I fall right here in the curve, and I know I'm probably going to do well. And I wish that it would have seemed that simple back then. It just seemed like such a big hurdle, and there was so much fear in letting go. And that's that. I would just encourage people to know you have nothing to lose by going to that first consult and reaching out, if you're on the fence, to all of the different bariatric groups that are on social media. People have done this before. You're not alone. These are all the things that I think would have been helpful to hear back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was there ever in the support group you talked about like, wow, strangers have become my friends of sorts from this support group? And I know that once we release this podcast, you're probably going to get a surge of people DMing you. Like, they don't care what we say. I mean, we have only done this a million times. They care what you say, what you felt. What is it like? What's the true experience? So
I'm happy to help.
you're happy to answer that. And was there anybody or any conversation maybe that you direct messaged somebody privately, or had maybe even saw a comment that actually kind of helped to change your thinking? Was there anything like that along the way when you were just considering bariatric surgery or a fresh post-op?
Yeah, many times during the at the time it was the 6-month lead up, the new try, I think at the time, or so yeah, during that time I was part of the group, and I was watching other people's success, and I was watching what they were doing, and then you see the people who are having success, and then I kind of associated, well, that person makes a big deal about hydration, or that person says they prioritize protein. You make these mental notes of like, they're having success, what are they doing, But yeah, I DM'd quite a few people during that time, and told them how helpful they were, and what an inspiration they were. And
Love that. I think you should write a book.
I know. I think you should write a book. First of all, he is so creative too.
Yeah.
No, he's really well. Are you like an author too, or something? You have this huge creative streak between the arts, the music,
musician and data lackey during the day here.
Oh gosh,
Like
that doesn't fit.
Two sides of your brain.
Get rid of this
really
data lackey part.
Well,
Like you there's so much
job.
potential in there. Yeah,
I
get rid
needed
of
a
this damn day
to
job.
support my music habit. That was the problem.
Yeah, right.
Well, I know.
We have a bad habit of encouraging people to quit their day job, so.
Yeah, we do. And I just did. So, whatever. But, it's funny. Like, I've always looked at you, since you were post-op, I don't really even identify you as who you were. I think this is you're now who you always were, like you just said. And I think that's such a powerful thought too. And, when I see your stuff, I always am like, you're like too cool or something. I feel like you're so cool. Like I always feel like a little bit like nervous to like text you and stuff. Like I do fangirl on you. I really do. How isn't he so cute? Like I can't even take it. I can say it on the podcast because it feels like I'm just like this fake persona right now. But like behind closed doors when I want to like DM you and I'm like, hey, would you be on the podcast? And you were like, yes. I'm like, you're the perfect guy. Your story needs to be told.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm happy to help. Yeah, I know I know, like I have friends who are heavy and we talk a lot, and you know, I wish that 10 or 15% would go up, you know, because I think that it's just I wish I had done it sooner. That's really what I wish.
Yeah.
But I don't have any regret, you know.
Good.
That is such a good parting thought. Like, what is your biggest regret? I have none, except for I wish I would have done it sooner and changed my life. But I think that you needed to hit that rock bottom to build that as the foundation for the rest of your life. Because I think that your outcome perhaps might have been different if you didn't have such low lows. I do think that.
Yep.
Yeah. That moment, those moments are so pivotal. But Jason, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We're gonna have to think of a catchy title for this one.
Yes.
I'll leave it to my creative buds here between Hannah and you. The two of you can come up with something. But gosh, thank you again for sharing that. I know that's probably not easy to get all that out there.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. No, this is great. And anywhere you want people to find you on Instagram or something like that? You're pretty big. You're pretty active on there, right? I'm
active, but it's under Fire Walk With Me _do. I know it's hard. It's DEUX, but on TikTok or Instagram.
Okay. All right, there you go. So keep
huge
an eye out.
bariatric community on TikTok. I don't know if you knew that, but there's a huge bariatric community on TikTok.
I need to get over there.
Occasionally crosses my path on there, but
we
need to
with meetups, like where people come from other states and like do meetups, and it's really a good support network. So.
Wow.
Wow.
There you go.
I need to
check
cross that divide.
Yeah, right?
Instead of TikTok. I gotta get I need more hours, but
yeah, we need more than 24 hours in a day. That's the problem. All right. Well, of course, you can find us on Instagram at DoctorXDietitian, at our website, DoctorXDietitian.com. And thank you, Jason, so much for coming on. This was amazing, and we look forward to hopefully talking to you soon.
Likewise. Take care.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Bye.